my friends. Chris Marcus here with you on Tuesday, November 28th with Arcadia's weekly wrap-up. I'm going to be aiming to do these on Friday, so a couple days behind for last week's update. But nonetheless, just to go through a couple stories, keep you posted on some of the things that are happening out there. Obviously, cryptos have gotten a lot of the focus lately. Although with that said, doesn't mean that things aren't still happening in the gold and silver market. Here we had a story last week. Russia is scooping up gold like there's no tomorrow, no petrodollar tomorrow. Again, not like maybe the petrodollar was meant to collapse overnight, yet you still see the signs happening one after another. There are, again, the rumors of the Petro-Yuan arrangement. We can see continued, there's an interesting story of more turmoil in the Saudi Arabian kingdom. So God only knows what's happening beneath the surface, yet, well, perhaps people aren't buying a lot of gold here in the US on the citizen level. Like to always put numbers to these things whenever possible, and fortunately, Luis Camerosano of Small Gold has some numbers from Russia, added 700,000 ounces of gold to its reserves. You can see very clearly in this chart here that in about the last couple of years, increased their gold holdings about 50%. Steady increase up to 1,800 tons. Putting that in perspective, you have the US with 8,000, Germany, IMF, Italy, France, China, and then there's Russia at 7th place, which at 1,700 tons, up 1,200 tons in the last couple of years. So just because Ben Bernanke might say that he doesn't understand gold, seems like the countries that are giving every indication possible that they're tired of seeing the dollar printed are going towards gold and other assets. Other assets such as Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Again, this story has been developing over the last month, where Zimbabwe doesn't have its own currency and Bitcoin is surging. Again, it's interesting that in places where the currency is already experiencing more overt trouble, you see, what are they turning to? Bitcoin. Again, over here, another story. This one, let's see. Growing number of Venezuelans traded bolivars for Bitcoin to buy necessities. We've heard reports of that ongoing over the past couple months. So while certainly gold is going to be a beneficiary when the system runs into more trouble, interesting that in places where what we're talking about, and really the economics of Venezuela or Zimbabwe, if you actually look at the Federal Reserve is doing, if you just take the names off, I mean, it seems insane. Everyone looks at these as foreign, faraway things. Yet it's pretty much the exact same thing that is happening with the dollar. And I would expect you'll get a similar outcome. So imagine if the demand for Bitcoin continues to grow as people, A, see the flaws in the existing currencies. And then also, as I've begun to use Bitcoin more, made a purchase last week where I got a 10% discount for using Bitcoin. It's pretty nifty. But just getting used to the technology and seeing just the small ways and the ease of use. There is a layer of getting used to it that you have to go through, but I find the more that you use it, the simpler it becomes, and it's interesting to notice the ways in which it can be easier to use than the current system. For example, I had to pay one of my employees. And I remember thinking about, well, if I wanted to go get cash, I'd have to go to the bank and I'd have to go take it and get it. Or even if you write a check and mail it, versus, fortunately now we have a Litecoin account open for her and could have just instantly sent it without having to leave anywhere. You don't have to pay anything close to what these ATM fees come out to. So Again, interesting to see the adoption taking place. And one of the reasons that I think you're going to hear more about in terms of why people are going to cryptos, certainly there's a handful of reasons, although something that I want to phrase in the right way because it's not really to bash one party over the other, but to the degree a lot of the people have been talking about the cryptos and seeing these things happen, along those lines, many of the same folks have been mentioning about some of these sex and child abuse scandals that have popped up in Hollywood. Continue to hear the same thing involving a lot of people in Washington. And for what it's worth, you see here ex-Clinton Foundation official, which, again, am I able to say exactly what the Clinton Foundation has or hasn't done? No. But have I heard enough from people that report on these things that I respect and trust? And now in conjunction with some of the other things that we've seen come out, to the degree that really if these things, and again, here we go over Bill Clinton and the Epstein's Lolita Express, although perhaps even more directly tied to the market, this Clinton Uranium One scandal. Obviously, you're going to get a lot of different views of what did or didn't happen, although just to the degree that, as I say this, political feelings aside, but to the degree of someone who's following the market and sees some massive cracks in Washington, whether it's the Clintons or the Bushes, just these things are happening. I don't think a lot of people know about them. By all means, go ahead, do your own research and dig in and see what you think. But if any of it's even anywhere near true that the president was selling uranium to who we've been trained to view as the bad guy in the state of Russia, well, certainly as I start hearing these things and just how wild perhaps we've known, whether it's the banks or the governments or the tank builders, that they get involved in some funky stuff. And either case, I think you're going to be hearing about more and more things that will shock you to the point where it will affect government, that it will affect the financial markets. So from that standpoint, here's at least a few things to look into. And to wrap things up, of course, what would it be without another week and another Fed official saying that basically, if you scroll down here, I would not think that we have to march, he's talking about interest rates, up considerably higher from where we are now in order to keep unemployment at a low level and to keep inflation under control. Translation, here's one guy who doesn't think we need higher rates. So for all the talk about Fed, temporary low interest rates, we're going to raise the rates. Janet Yellen, previously we mentioned how she said there's an uncomfortably high chance that they'll have to resort to unconventional policy. Translation, lower rates. So on one hand, things are good. All this money printing and quantitative easing worked. Yet here we are 10 years later and more Fed officials talking about rates being lower. So just factor in what they're saying with a grain of salt. Perhaps the Fed realizes that if they did raise rate, you'd have a lot of bad debt and another crash in the housing market, as well as the stock and bond markets, which is why they continue to print money and back themselves into a corner, which is the whole reason you see people going to cryptos. And in due time, I believe you'll see that reflected in the pricing of gold and silver as well. So fascinating times in the market, but leave your comments and questions below. Anything that does or doesn't make sense or like to see commented on in the future, and hit that subscribe button. And with that said, we'll see you again, hopefully Friday this week. And as always, thanks for watching, and I hope you're doing well out there.